It was 2015, and I had been hiking alone in Arizona for years. Long trails, harsh sun, and the kind of quiet that made your own heartbeat sound like a drum. That morning, I decided on a trail I had never taken before, hidden behind thick bushes and faded paths. The kind of trail that promised solitude, which I craved. I didn't want crowds. I didn't want chatter. I just wanted space to think, to breathe, and to escape the stress of my life. The trail started with a patch of desert, dry, hot, and still. As I walked, the terrain began to rise, and the mountains stretched out before me, open yet imposing. The path wound through patches of scrub and eventually into a more wooded area. But the trees were strange, dry, brittle, some completely dead, their branches tangled like skeletal fingers reaching across the trail. Fallen trunks forced me to step carefully, sometimes climb over, sometimes squeeze around. It was clear no one had been here in years. I had always liked hiking alone. The sound of my own boots crunching over twigs, the whisper of wind through the dry brush, that was enough company for me. But after an hour, the quiet started to feel heavy. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you listen for anything that doesn't belong. That's when I heard it, a whistle, faint and melodic, coming from somewhere above me on the mountain. It held a few notes and then stopped, echoing softly through the canyon. I froze. My heart thumped, a mix of unease and curiosity. Whistling hikers weren't uncommon, and I told myself that was all it was. Someone else was up here, just like me, hiking alone. But then, 20 minutes later, it came again. Louder, closer. The notes cut through the still air, and this time I couldn't ignore it. My instincts told me to turn back, to leave the trail, but a part of me wanted to see who it was. I gripped my pocket knife tighter in my hand. The path narrowed. Overgrown bushes scraped against my arms as I pushed through, the air smelling faintly of dust and decaying wood. And then I saw it, a small valley, likely carved by a long-dried river. And in the center, a den made of sticks, layered with precision, almost too complex to be anything but man-made. My stomach turned. The whistle suddenly made sense. Someone could be living here. Someone who didn't want to be found. My gut screamed at me to leave. I turned to retrace my steps. Then the whistle came again, right behind me. I froze, unable to move, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Slowly, I turned around, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A goat, not just any goat. It was massive, far larger than any I had seen in the area. Its eyes, they stared straight into me, motionless. And then, impossibly, its mouth moved. It whistled. The same haunting, melodic whistle I had been hearing for what felt like hours. I don't even know how I managed to react. Fear consumed me entirely. I ran. I stumbled over rocks, crashed through branches, fell multiple times, and didn't dare look back. The whistle echoed softly behind me, following me down the mountain. Only when I burst out of the trail and back to my car did I stop, gasping for breath, soaked in sweat and covered in scratches. I never told anyone. I would have sounded insane. But years later, after reading about skinwalkers, a part of me knew that what I saw wasn't just an oversized goat. Something in the Arizona wilderness had been watching me, and it had imitated the human sound of whistling, just to lure me closer. I've never gone back to that trail, and sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I still hear that whistle. I can't explain what it was. but I know it was waiting for me, and somewhere it's still out there. I thought it was just a silly childhood prank until I saw something in the woods that shouldn't have existed. Every summer, my family went camping in Wisconsin with some close family friends. It was a ritual, something I looked forward to all year. But there was one part of these trips that terrified and thrilled me at the same time: the snipe hunt. If you've never heard of a snipe hunt, let me explain. Snipe don't exist. At least, that's what the adults said. The whole point was a prank, a way for my dad and his best friend, Billy, to take us kids out into the woods while they came up with ways to scare and amuse themselves. But when you're 8 or 9, you don't care if it's real or not. You just want to see it. They described the snipe as a highly aggressive, bird-like creature, usually hiding in trees and only appearing at night. Every year, my sister and I listened wide-eyed as they told us stories of their encounters from previous trips. And every year, we begged to come along, convinced we'd finally see one. This year was no different. On the second night, after everyone had settled into the campground, my dad and Billy gathered the kids. They claimed a snipe had been seen near our RV the night before, and that tonight they were going to catch it. I could barely contain my excitement, my heart hammering in my chest. My sister and I were ready, sticks in hand for protection, and our imaginations running wild. We followed them into the woods as the sun dipped below the trees, leaving long shadows that danced across the forest floor. Billy ran ahead to scout while we trudged through the underbrush, the sounds of twigs snapping and leaves crunching under our feet. 10 minutes in, I froze. Something rustled in the trees. Then Billy jumped out, covered in red paint, screaming that the snipe had gotten him. The forest erupted with screams and laughter. All of us kids running, some terrified, some laughing, and me. I ran without thinking. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran. Eventually, I stumbled into a bush beneath a large tree and hid, pressing myself into the shadows. I tried not to cry or make a sound. Minutes passed, and the chaos faded behind me. And then I saw it. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. Something moved slowly through the trees, its legs long and thin, almost unnatural. Its head was mangled, misshapen, patches of hair scattered across its body like a half-finished scarecrow. Its movements were deliberate, slow, almost curious, and I could hear faint moaning as it passed. I couldn't look away. Fear gripped me, but there was also this strange pull, a morbid fascination I couldn't shake. The deeper I stared, the more overwhelming a sense of dread became. It wasn't like anything I had ever felt. It was wrong, unnatural. My gut screamed it. And then it saw me. Its head snapped toward me, and we locked eyes. I couldn't move. Its gaze wasn't animalistic. It was intelligent, calculating, human, almost. I froze, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. Before I could even react, I heard crunching behind me, twigs snapping, leaves shifting. The creature paused, and the mutual stare shattered when my dad appeared, grabbing me by the arm and scolding me for running off. Relief flooded me, but all I could think about was that creature. I turned back, and it was gone. Not a sound, not a trace. That night, I learned 2 things. Snipes were fake, and the woods held something far more disturbing. I tried to rationalize it as a coyote or a trick of my imagination, but my instincts told me otherwise. Something had been watching me, studying me, and it wasn't human. Years later, I read about Skinwalkers, shape-shifting entities that mimic animals, humans, and sometimes things in between. And suddenly, all the pieces clicked. The creature I saw that night wasn't a joke. It wasn't a prank. It was something else entirely. Even now, decades later, when I ride my bike or hike through the woods, I sometimes see it again, lurking just out of the corner of my eye. The memory has never left me, and I've never told anyone the full story because I don't think they would understand. But I know what I saw, and I know it saw me. I don't think it's ever truly gone. It's still out there, watching, waiting for the next moment I wander too far into its forest. For almost 10 years, my family lived in a small cabin deep in the Canadian wilderness. It was the kind of quiet, peaceful life most people only dream about. No traffic, no noise, just the endless hum of nature and the occasional call of a bird in the distance. Our cabin sat in a clearing, surrounded by thick pine trees. The nearest town was miles away, and there were no roads leading to us, just narrow trails carved out by years of foot traffic. We weren't completely alone. A few other families lived in cabins scattered miles apart through the forest. Over time, faint paths formed between us, as we'd often trade goods, share meals, and lend a hand when someone needed it. We had a small vegetable garden and a few animals, chickens, goats, even a couple of cows. It was hard work, but it was honest work. Every morning I'd wake to the sound of my wife humming as she prepared breakfast and my 2 kids laughing somewhere outside. I remember thinking I'd built something good, a life that felt whole. But peace, I've learned, is fragile. And sometimes the forest takes it back. It started one night in early autumn. I was sitting in the living room, reading, while the rest of the family slept. The fire had burned low, casting orange flickers on the wooden walls. Outside, the night was still, the kind of stillness that presses against the windows. Then I heard it. The cattle, they were moving around frantically. Not grazing, running. I frowned, stood up, and moved toward the window that faced the back field. Through the thin curtain, I could see the herd gathered to the far left side of the field, their movements quick and nervous. My first thought was a predator, maybe a bear or a wolf. I scanned the right side of the field, and that's when I saw it. A deer dot. It stood partly behind a tree facing the house. It didn't move. Its body was still, unnaturally still, and its head was tilted slightly as if it was looking straight at me. I couldn't be sure. The darkness made everything grainy and uncertain, but something about it felt off. I remember thinking how strange it was that the cattle would run from a deer. I stood there for almost a minute, waiting for it to move. It didn't. I finally pulled the curtain shut and told myself it was nothing, just my imagination. But that was only the beginning. A few weeks later, my wife shook me awake in the middle of the night. Her eyes were wide, her finger pressed to her lips. "Listen," she whispered. At first, I couldn't hear anything. Then it came a faint scraping sound, slow and deliberate, like someone dragging a stick along the outside of the cabin walls. It moved in a circle, around and around. The sound was almost rhythmic, growing louder as it passed each window, then fading, then returning again. The hairs on my neck stood up. I got out of bed, grabbed my rifle, and checked the kids' room. They were fast asleep. I told my wife to stay put, then moved carefully from window to window. When I reached the last one, our bedroom window, I saw it. The deer, standing just beyond the tree line, facing the house again. Same posture, same stillness. Only this time, I could see its eyes reflecting in the moonlight. And I swear, For a moment, I thought I saw something human in them. My heart hammered in my chest. I closed the curtain, loaded the rifle, and sat awake the rest of the night. The scraping never came back, but the silence that replaced it was worse. The next morning, I found nothing. No prints, no marks, no sign that anything had been there. I tried to convince myself it was just an animal acting strangely. But my wife wouldn't let the kids outside that day, and honestly, I didn't blame her. Days passed, then weeks. Life returned to a fragile normal. Until one morning, I decided to visit my neighbor, George, a man who'd lived in these woods longer than anyone else I knew. I wanted to ask him if he'd seen anything strange. I told my wife to lock the doors, keep the kids close, and I set out along the narrow path that cut through the forest. The air was cold, the kind of cold that makes your breath hang in front of you like smoke. For the first mile, I kept running through explanations in my head. Maybe a sick deer, maybe someone playing a prank. But the deeper I went, the heavier the woods felt. The silence was wrong. I realized I couldn't even hear birds anymore. Then, the sound of leaves behind me. At first it was faint, a soft crunch, like something stepping carefully. I turned, scanning the path. Nothing. I kept walking, faster now. Then it came again, closer. A few more steps. I stopped, turned sharply, and froze. It was there the deer stood in the middle of the path, less than 20 feet away, but this time I could see everything clearly. Its body was twisted, too tall, too thin. The fur along its back was missing in patches, revealing grayish skin underneath. And its eyes, they weren't right. The whites were visible, the pupils small and narrow, not like an animal's eyes at all, but like a person's dot. My throat went dry. I raised my rifle but didn't fire. Something in me, instinct maybe, told me that if I shot it, something worse would happen. The deer didn't move. It just stared. Then, slowly, its head tilted all the way to the side until it looked wrong, broken. That was it. I turned and ran. Branches whipped at my face, my boots sliding on loose dirt, heart pounding so loud it drowned everything else out. I didn't stop until I saw smoke from George's chimney. When he opened the door, I must have looked insane, out of breath, trembling, gun still in hand. He sat me down, gave me water, and listened. When I told him what I'd seen, he didn't laugh. He didn't even look surprised. He just sighed and rubbed his face. Then he told me something I'll never forget. He said, "You disturbed it." I asked him what he meant, and he told me about the Skinwalker's ancient Navajo legends of beings that could take the shape of animals. Sometimes human, sometimes something in between. He said they only reveal themselves if they want something from you, or if you've crossed a line. I wanted to tell him I didn't believe in that sort of thing, but the look in his eyes stopped me. He wasn't telling a story. He was warning me. I left soon after, half running the whole way home. But nothing happened that day, or the next. Weeks passed. Slowly, the fear began to fade. I started to sleep again, to laugh with my kids, to pretend life was normal. But the peace never truly returned. Every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me. Every time the wind moved through the trees, I expected to see that deer standing in the shadows. Eventually, I told my wife we needed to move. I didn't tell her why, just said we needed to get closer to town for the kids' sake. She didn't argue. Maybe she felt it too. We left that cabin 15 years ago. The family who bought it from us tore. it down and built a new one in its place. Sometimes I wonder if they ever saw it, if, on some cold night, their cattle started to stir and a tall, still figure stood watching from the trees. I never told my wife or my kids what really happened. Some things you carry alone, because putting them into words makes them real again. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, when I wake up and look out the window of our new home, I swear I can still see it, standing there at the edge of the woods, watching, waiting, closing line, 15 years later. I still can't forget those eyes, too human to belong to any animal, and too hollow to belong to anything alive.